It's a lawsuit that may never happen if the state attorney general gets his way. Why Greg Zeller is calling for a deal between State Superintendent Glenda Ritz and the State Board of Education. Plus, former Marion County prosecutor Carl Brizzi learns a 3-year federal investigation is over. We have his only interview. And John Gregg says thanks, but no thanks, to another run for governor. All that and a sit-down conversation with Indiana Senator Dan Coates on the state of Washington politics. It's all coming up on this edition of Indianapolis This Week.
From RTV6, Indianapolis This Week.
The State Superintendent of Public Instruction is ready for a legal fight with the State Board of Education. But Indiana Attorney General Greg Zeller is saying, let's make a deal. Zeller wants to see the lawsuit dismissed with an out-of-court resolution. His office must represent Superintendent Glenda Ritz in any lawsuit, and Ritz alleges the board broke the law when it took the ability to administer school grades from her department without a public meeting.
When I was sworn into office, I took an oath to uphold the laws of the state of Indiana. I take this oath very seriously, and I was dismayed to learn that other members of the state board have not complied with the requirements of the law. While I respect the commitment and expertise of the members of the board individually, they have collectively overstepped their bounds.
And now joining us are two of our political insiders, Democrat Kip Tu and Abdul Hakim Shabazz with IndyPolitics.org. How do we move forward? How do they move forward when there's a legal fight right in the middle?
You move forward by having the lawsuit dismissed. Glenda Ritz does not have the legal authority to file this lawsuit. And even if she did, if you look at the way she did the lawsuit, she named the board members as individuals. Individuals can't necessarily can't commit the violation, only boards can. So this thing is rife with complaints, it's rife with problems. She should just go ahead and do her job. And if she did her job, the board wouldn't be asking help from the Legislative Services Agency to help with A through F grading.
Unfortunately, Glenda Ritz is under siege at the State House. She's the only elected Democrat at the highest levels of state government, and so everybody's got to sort of lobbing bombs at her, and it's really unfortunate. She has been trying to do her job, and they continually try to take all of her job away from her. And I think that it's really unfortunate what's going on, because the best interests of kids are not being in the forefront of people's minds here. It's a fight for turf, and it's too bad. I've said this many times, and I believe it to be true. Republicans didn't like the fact she got elected, and so they've been systematically ignoring the will of the electorate with respect to her, not treating her as an elected official, but trying to run ramshod around her, over her, through her, and I think she's finally had enough.
So is this a sign of her frustration, or is she putting them on notice to say, if you don't work with me, I'll take you to court?
This is a sign of frustration. This is a sign of a distraction. The fact that she has been meeting her legislative deadlines. When you have Democrats and Republicans and independents who all make up the State Board of Education, when a Gary Democrat says, Glenda Ritz, you are not doing your job, that ought to tell you everything that you need to know.
Final word on this one.
Well, I don't think that's irrelevant. I think the problem here is everybody knows that there were problems with the I-STEP scoring, and so it's taking more time to get through A through F, and everybody knows there's problems with A through F. All that stuff she inherited. It's not her problem.
This week we also learned that the former Marion County prosecutor, Carl Brizzi, will not be the focus, or the focus of a federal investigation is now over. He spoke exclusively to RTV6. This is what he had to say.
But we've been under a constant cloud for the last 3 years of people either believing or assuming that we've acted unethically or illegally, and it's been tough for me, for my family, since I've left the prosecutor's office. And so what we said today is what we've always known, is that we've done nothing wrong. And now, after 3 years and millions of dollars of taxpayers' money, apparently, Joe Hogsett and the U.S. Attorney's Office came to the same conclusion.
The U.S. Attorney saying he did not have direct evidence to charge Mr. Brizzi with bribery. Was this a case of a U.S. Attorney who was following the lead, or someone who overreached? This investigation went on for 3 years.
The investigation went on for a long time. There's no doubt about that. And I think that Joe Hogsett did exactly the right thing, and the thing that should have been done in this instance, and that was, Carl Brizzi is a very high-profile person, and to have this continually hanging over his head, I think it was the right. He did Carl Brizzi a favor by announcing that he was no longer the subject of an investigation. Carl took it the wrong way. I think he did him a favor.
Oh, I don't know about all that. I mean,
by announcing that he was no longer under investigation, because the cloud now disappears.
Because he didn't have any choice, because it didn't go anywhere. I do think I actually watched, listened to the entire interview, and I don't necessarily, I'd let Carl speak as his attorney, but I totally understand his frustration. What I think is interesting is we all know, and may as well say it, we all know that Joe has higher political aspirations, and I think that this was more of a detriment to him that he just couldn't get the one that got away, and that would have been Carl Brizzi.
There is talk that Mr. Hogsett
Look, the easy political
thing in Indianapolis, right? There's talk of that. Is that the case?
He's one of our most talented public officials in this state. And
he's
so
running
I think
for office, so he should be.
Well, he's very talented, and without a doubt would be a great public servant in whatever he did. I think the political thing here would to indict Carl Brizzi with the evidence that was there, and then let the court system take care of it. That would have been his better service as if he were really thinking about running for public office. But instead, he said, I don't have the evidence to get this conviction, so I'm not going to make him go through this process, and so he's not. And I think everybody's well served by it.
Looking ahead at 2016, someone we will not see on the ballot will be Democrat John Gregg. He will not be running for governor. So who will run against Mike Pence if he doesn't run for president? Because there's also talk that Mr. Pence may be a candidate for 2016.
Well, let me first say a word about John Gregg, if I could. A great public servant, and he ran a very good campaign. I know there's some people that didn't think he did, but he came very, very close to beating Mike Pence. It was a very close race. People didn't think it was going to be close. It ended up being very close. He would have been a great candidate again in a rematch with Mike Pence. Having said that, there's a lot of lamenting that Democrats are without good candidates, and I beg to differ. I think we've got a lot of good candidates, potential candidates against Mike Pence, starting with some of our mayor candidates up to including Scott Pelath, Vi Simpson. There's a lot of folks out there that I think would be great candidates against Mike Pence.
Is there a threat? I mean, first on Mr. Gregg, and is there who replaces him on the ticket?
John Gregg, although philosophically disagree with him on some issues, has always been a good guy, good-hearted, great to get along with. I don't know necessarily if a rematch would have played out necessarily the same way as an original campaign, because now Governor Pence has a record, and incumbents have a little bit of a different creature. What I do think is interesting to see who the Democrats start to look at for 2016. I agree with Kep. The mayors are potential candidates, but don't be surprised if you see the Glenda Ritz people think they could be governor too.
And I forgot to mention Barron Hill. He's a very capable person who could be a great governor as well.
We'll continue this conversation on our green room. They are the best in the business. You could listen to them. You could also get what they have to think about on the IndyChannel.com with their many postings. When we return on this program, Senator Dan Coats talks about the broken state of Washington and what he thinks needs to happen to ensure a solid financial future for our nation. Approval ratings for Congress continue to reach new lows because of the fallout from the government shutdown. A new ABC News Washington Post poll shows the shutdown left both sides down in the polls. Only 12% approve of the job lawmakers in Washington are doing. 85% simply disapprove. This week, I sat down with Indiana's senior Senator Dan Coats to get his take on the next round of pending government deadlines. Senator, thank you for joining us. We are now in the middle of negotiations on Capitol Hill for a December deadline to avoid another shutdown possibly in January, to maybe also for debt ceiling discussions in February. Are we going to make those deadlines?
I sure hope so, because this is the nightmare that just doesn't seem to end. We are careening from crisis to crisis, short-term solution to short-term solution, and we're putting a huge cloud of uncertainty over a struggling economy that's trying to grow and get people back to work. The slowest recovery since the Great Depression. Unemployment still very high, and I think the uncertainty of where Washington is going, what our policies are going to be, has just put a damper on everything, like a big wet blanket thrown over all of it. We have to resolve for a long-term basis, I think, to impose certainty back into business individuals' decisions about expanding their plant, hiring people, consumers' expectations in terms of, is it right now okay, buy a new home, to add on to the porch onto the back, are we going to have enough money to send the kids to college, etc. Maybe we shouldn't spend as much. This is really impacting our economy, and it's because of all this short-term stuff. Now that we're past this last one, I hope we use this time as an opportunity to get together and do what I think all of us, Republicans and Democrats, know we need to do, and that is put in place a long-term plan to get us back to fiscal health. It may take some years to accomplish, but we have to show that we have put a plan together that's supported from the president, support from Democrats, support from Republicans, that addresses the runaway spending that's taking place in Washington that's driving all of this.
Can you guys and ladies get to that point? Because if the Democrats say we want revenue enhancement, that's code word for taxes, and you say we need to work on entitlements, which then people will accuse you of taking a Who's Your Grandma's Social Security check, which you're not wanting to do. How do both sides get what they need without it becoming a campaign commercial in the next cycle?
Well, that's what we have to avoid, and I hope that
So can you avoid it? Because it's so polarizing.
Well, I would say we have to, because I think we put the American people through so much, and particularly over this last drama, shutdown and so forth, that repeating that within just a 2 to 3 month period of time, I think is just, people are just going to give up, or their frustration is just going to boil over. I understand that frustration. I understand this dysfunction and how people have lost, how we've lost trust among the American people. It's very dangerous for a democracy when you can no longer trust your government or no longer trust your representatives that are representing you in that government. So I think, I'm hoping that both sides will recognize how serious this situation is and how important it is for us to come forward with something that's long-term and addresses the real underlying problems.
So what can you accept? Because the other side's going to want some taxes. You don't want to raise taxes. You want to cut back on some entitlements, or at least reform those systems. So what can you accept as the senior senator from Indiana, that you can say to Hoosiers, you know, we need to do this, that this is the right thing to do?
Well, unless it's put into a grand bargain, we're not going to succeed here. Republicans feel they gave it the office. Last January, the fiscal cliff debate ended up in a tax increase only. Now, it was on people earning more than $400,000. Republicans, that was a Democrat win. Republicans gained on the sequester because it imposes spending cuts. What's left out there? Two things. Tax reform, because tax reform is what puts elements of growth in by lowering corporate rates, making us more competitive, eliminating a lot of these loopholes that benefit a few and not the many. Tax reform combined with mandatory spending reform. It's the mandatory spending that has to be put on a path to solvency. No one wants to throw grandma off the cliff. Nobody wants to take away earned benefits from Medicare and Social Security. But the mandatory is eating up almost everything that comes in now. And so without that being a component, we won't, of the grand bargain, we won't succeed. I've been in numerous discussions with groups, small groups, and even personal discussions with the president, with the leadership, on why we need to go there, why all of us need to stand up and take a little bit of hit and a little bit of heat if we're going to accomplish that. But now, to me, seems the right time to do it, because we cannot continue down this road without real damage to our country.
And we have much more. When we return, we continue our conversation with Senator Coates and who he believes needs to step up to help with the nation's financial woes. Welcome back. Indiana Senator Dan Coates has plenty to say about entitlement reforms and what he believes should happen. We're talking about like someone like myself. I'll put myself sort of in the 40-ish. Okay. I'm 43, so I'll have to work maybe till 75 or 80. Are you going to ask me to take that hit? I mean, what are we really going to ask Americans to do?
Well, here's
Here's
one specific, and we can talk about this because we did it before. It was successful, and it did accomplish some significant progress, and that was the Social Security reform in 1983, effective 1984 in January. Ronald Reagan got together with Tip O'Neill and said, Tip, we got a problem here. We need to take this out of politics. You and I need to stand together for this. And if we do so, we can buy about 35 to 40 years of solvency for Social Security, which is about to stop having to cut checks for people. And they did that, and we passed that. And there were some howls of this and that. That raised the retirement age, eligibility age for Social Security from 65 to 67. But it did so in a very sensible way. Only 1 month a year for the next 24 months 24 years, excuse me, and we moved it from 65 to 67. I think we could do that for Medicare, to bring that from 65 to 67. If you're not getting Social Security to 67, we're all living longer, we're all healthier, and no one anticipated how long we would live and what the impact would be. Thank God for that, we are healthier. But then equating those two makes a lot of sense. If you're going to work that long, then you can go on Medicare at 67. The out-year savings of that is huge. It's into the trillions of dollars. If not doing that, it costs, we go into debt more trillions of dollars. That's just one suggestion. The cost of living formula is out of whack. Okay. That can be slightly adjusted. Maybe people who are earning a lot of money, who don't have to have Social Security to depend on it, we can means test that. So they perhaps would pay in more, or they wouldn't get as much benefit on the rich. Warren Buffett says, I don't need Social Security.
And he doesn't.
Fine.
Right, he doesn't.
He doesn't.
Right.
In fact, I've talked to a lot of people who said, look, I've been successful, my 401k is doing okay, I've got a nice retirement package from my company. I wouldn't mind getting a little less or paying a little more into it if that would help solve it. But we have to show something real and concrete that will address this problem. And I think the American people are ready to buy it, because if we don't, it's bankruptcy down the line. It's dumping it on our kids, which is, I think, irresponsible and almost immoral. We are the generation, my generation, that has to step up and say we're willing to take the tough vote here to put us in a better fiscal situation for the future of the country and the future of our kids and grandkids.
Indiana Senator Dan Coates. After the break, we begin to say farewell to one of our dear friends here at RTV6, Norman Cox, who has been covering politics in central Indiana for more than 3 decades, is now retiring. Next, our special conversation with Norman. Welcome back. This Friday, we say goodbye to an RTV icon, Norman Cox. He's retiring after more than 35 years of covering politics. I had a chance to spend some time with him at the State House, talking about his career and whether he believes the Indiana State House is still the people's house.
I think people are heard if they overwhelm legislators with phone calls and emails and letters and tweets. They can be heard. It's really hard for people to come down here and be heard. It's a closed-off space. You have to know what you're doing, where you're going. I'll give you an example. You come down here to testify on a bill. You know the committee rooms are very small, they're very restricted, they're hard to find. You get in there and you have to sign up to testify. Well, all the lobbyists get here first to testify because it's their business. They're getting paid to know what's happening on a certain day. So they get in there and then they get heard first. And then maybe it's the time for the people to testify, and maybe not, because one habit around here that really annoys me is that a committee chairman will be getting down to where the plain ordinary folks are ready to testify, and they'll say, oh, wait a minute, I see the mayor of such and such out there, and he's a busy man, and he's taking some time off to be down here. Let's hear from him first. Let's move him up. Well, he's not any busier than the other people who probably had to take their vacation days to get down here.
How have the governors, the different governors you've covered, changed the sort of the personality of the chambers and of this building? Have you seen from Mr. Bowen to Mr. Pence, do they change? Do they?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's a question of not a change in any direction over time. It's more like from one to the next, you can have just a rapid fire change. Governor Bowen was, when I started out, was a very good governor, but he was not, I want to say caretaker, but he was not one that had a lot of initiatives. Bob Orr came in, and he had all kinds of ideas, almost like Mitch Daniels, except that Daniels was more of a personal dynamo. But Bob Orr did a lot of change in education. And some of the stuff that's affecting us to this day, he dragged the education system into the 20th century, kicking and screaming at times, trying to get kids to spend a minimum amount of their day in class over the objections of people who said it would make it hard to get the basketball team to the next county to play their game on time. Then we went to Evan Bayh, who was not a person who had a lot of initiatives here. He wanted to not spend money and build a record on that. Mitch Daniels came in, turned the place on its head. Nobody had as many ideas. I think he woke up in the morning spouting ideas and trying to figure out ways to get them enacted. And once he got, you know, the first page of ideas, he started in on the second page.
So then how do you manage to peel away? Because that's been your job over the last 3 decades, is to really get to the core of the issue. How do you do that? A lot of folks want to know, well, what's your secret?
Oh, I don't have any secret other than hard work. I mean, if you know what the issues are and the fact that somebody's not addressing them, you can maybe point out that somebody's saying something that he said 6 months ago when the issues were different. But
what will you miss then about coming to work every day, whether it's the long session or the short session, whether it's organization day? Or...
Well, remember, this is about a third of my job here in the legislature because they only meet 2.5 to 4 months a year. But this is what I will miss the most, the legislature. This is politics mixed with sports because, well, they're repairing them now, but you look up there and you see a scorecard or you see a scoreboard. And at the end of the day, at the end of every bill, there's a winner and a loser up there. And it sort of combines my two great loves in here, which is politics and sports, to come in here and you walk out every day knowing that the standings have changed.
Any thoughts of maybe sticking around, finishing up?
I will put my feet up and watch Katie Hines take care of it. It's in capable hands.
Will you miss it, though? Will you miss?
I'll miss it. Yes, I'll miss it. I will not miss the workload. I will not miss getting up at 6 a.m. and getting to work before everything starts here and staying late and even past rush hour in the evening. But yeah, I will miss this. You couldn't possibly do this for this long and not miss it.
Good luck, Norman, and we'll see you next week.